So with that in mind, how does the frequency of polling requests affect the CPU load and the cycle time of a PLC?
Yeah, so the quicker or the more often you need the data, it's going to have more of an impact in terms of increasing that time. I will say that in general, kind of where PLCs are going and like the programming behind them is more task-based now. So probably looking more at utilizing periodic tasks rather than a continuous task where the cycle time isn't something that I'm as tuned into as maybe 10 years ago or even before that, especially with some of the older PLC hardware. But you would still see that some anomalies if you were going to overtax your PLC, like you'll see um, data dropping out or data corruption. You'll see skipping executional logic if you're overtaxing your PLC by that's either requesting I/O too heavily, like too heavily for the processor, having too many Ethernet connections to the processor, um, all things that can give you abnormal performance. So yeah, the faster you need it, the larger or the more capacity you need for your processor, and also just kind of like I said before, being intentional about your settings. So if you have data that's not critical, you can, if we're talking about in PLC setup on the hardware side, that requested packet interval, you can slow those IO points down so that you're getting
Okay.
that data at a more reasonable rate, and then maybe you have a high-speed counter that need that data really quickly for the execution of your logic. So you can have that coming in at a quicker polling rate, have your slower response data coming in at a higher requested packet interval. And the same kind of tactics can be used on your SCADA, where you can break up your data into fast responses, slow responses, so that you can minimize that impact
Mhm.
with lesser um, hardware software requirements.
So it sounds like the strategy you were describing there is almost like the strategy you have with sending data to the cloud or to the edge versus how critical it is for immediate analysis versus long-term analysis. I know that's a different role versus what you do, but it sounds like the same thing where you're parsing the data, what's most important, what's needed, how or when or for what action. It's a kind of similar assessment of the data to minimize the impact of polling. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's really reviewing the use case carefully of um, being sure that you're starting with the need rather than starting with the software and um, not putting everything at the fastest request rate just because it's capable of that. Because you're looking for that in the processor, the software might handle that at the current state, but if you're looking to add on to it later, then you'd have to go through and make those modifications at a later date to get you that added capacity when you might already have it if you're just setting up your processor uh, in the most efficient manner from the get-go. But yeah, and then in terms of, I think the same to your comments more directly, same thing, just being intentional about what's the critical data coming out of each end device and really mapping that out so that um, you can transmit that data in the most efficient manner.